everybody, welcome to WTF Hammer Underworlds. All right, we're nearing the end of the Season 4 Warband reviews with only 2 warbands left. Second to last are Kainan's Reapers, who will be available for pre-order very soon. But fortunately, all the cards have been released for this warband. So all I'll be doing in this video is looking at this warband's fighter cards, their faction-specific cards, that being their objective and power cards. Then I will rate them theoretically based on all this information and compare them to all other previously released warbands. So I'll just jump right into it by starting with this warband's fighter cards. And this is the second warband in Season 4 with 6 units. All other ones have 4 units thus far. And these guys have a very unique Inspire mechanic in which they basically acquire tithe counters through a process that I'll explain in a minute. And once they've collectively accumulated 3 counters, all of these units inspire. And we're going to be starting with the leader of this warband, a very intense big guy type of leader, Kainan, who has a lot going for him. First to note, he's a wizard, level 1. That's not a huge factor for this warband, but it is nice. 3 movement, which is not good. 1 shield, going to 2 shield when inspired, which is great. A massive 6 wounds. And really the attacks are what make this unit stand out. Mole log level attacks. The Soul Reaper Axe with reach, 2 hammers, 3 damage uninspired, going to 4 damage inspired, which is huge. And a Scything attack, the Reaping Swing, 2 hammers, 2 damage, going to 3 hammers when inspired. Having Bone Tithe, which is the way to accumulate tithe counters, and I'll describe that in a minute. But also having Invigorated, where at the start of this fighter's activation, you can discard 2 tithe counters, and if you do, you could pick 1 modifier and apply it to this fighter, either giving them +1 move or +1 dice or +1 damage on the Soul Reaper Axe. So a nice ability, cost tithe counters, but just huge damage potential. This guy can have 3 hammers, 4 damage on a reach 2 attack, which is very intense. Moving on to the next fighter, who's Bainar Kenta, a Mortec. So Mortec is a new keyword exclusive to this warband, who has a 2 reach attack as well, 2 hammers, 2 damage, having the Nadirite quality and getting cleave when inspired. 3 move, 1 shield, 3 wounds, does not change when inspired. And the whole Nadirite trait I will be describing very soon, but I'm going to look at the Bone Tithe because it's written specifically on this fighter's card. And like I said, this is the way that these guys accumulate tithe counters, which is how they inspire. So after an enemy fighter is taken out of action, gain 1 tithe counter. If that fighter has a wounds characteristic of 4+, gain 2 tithe counters instead. Only 1 fighter can use this ability each time a fighter is taken out of action. So basically it applies to either the leader or this dude. And obviously once they have 3 counters collectively, all units inspire. Seemingly not that easy to acquire. Kind of implies you need to kill 2 or 3 enemies generally in order for these guys to inspire. So obviously in a multiplayer 3 to 4 player game, these guys inspire very easily. One-on-one a little bit less easily, although they do have tools to help themselves gain counters, which I'll be talking about when I get to the power cards. Next is Hakor, who's also a Mortec, one of the melee guys, 1 range, 2 hammers, 2 damage, getting cleave when inspired. 3 move, 1 shield, 2 wounds, so nothing too exceptional there. But like the rest of these lesser Mortecs, has the Mortec Advance reaction, which is really just a special movement ability, where after this fighter's move action, you can choose 1 friendly Mortec that has no move or charge tokens, and that chosen fighter can make a move action that must end adjacent to this fighter. So basically, if Hakor moves, another guy could then move as long as he's ends up adjacent to this fighter after the move, and then another guy can move, and you just cluster all of your guys very easily this way, moving them up their 3 movements so long as they end up adjacent to each other after their movement. So it allows you to take lots of actions in a single activation. There's Karu, who also has this Mortec Advance, who's another melee guy, 1 range, 2 hammers, 1 damage with the Nadirite quality, getting 2 damage and knockback when inspired, 3 move, 1 shield, going to 2 shields and 2 wounds, so 2 wounds not too exceptional. But here we get to the Nadirite special ability. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but basically these guys get extra damage when they are supporting each other. So +1 damage if the attack roll contains any single support, and there is 1 friendly supporting Mortec, or if it contains either a single or double support if there are 2 supporting friendly Mortecs. Basically, if these guys move in and cluster and then take an attack action, and you happen to roll the support on the die, that 1 damage becomes 2 uninspired or 3 inspired. So you can have this little measly dude doing 3 damage as long as he is attacking with support, which obviously increases his odds of landing that attack. And it's also likely to happen because Mortec Advance causes these guys to cluster. So very, very nice additional ability. This guy has the Nadirite ability as well, is also a hunter. This is Nohem, has more tech advance, and uses a bow. 3 range, 2 hammers, 1 damage, going to 3 hammers when inspired. Base characteristics not super exceptional with 3 move, 1 shield, 2 wounds. And finally, there's Senha, the final Mortek, who has 3 move, 1 shield, gets 2 shield when inspired, just like Karu, and then 2 wounds. Melee attack like Karu as well, so 1 range, 2 hammers, 1 damage. Nadirite getting 3 swords, 2 damage when inspired. So both these guys able to basically do 3 damage in the right conditions when inspired, which is very nice for lesser units like this. And then the 2 shield defense is very nice as well. So that does it for these fighters. Let's just take a look at the pros. And there are a ton of pros with this warband. The special combat abilities, first of all. So scything, cleave when inspired, knockback when inspired for certain units. The special abilities like invigorated, the whole Nadirite cluster attack, and the more tech advance. They have reach and ranged attackers. They have a wizard. They have high wounds, especially the leader with 6 wounds. Hunter keyword for one of the units. And really the leader is Molog version 2.0. But instead of coming with relatively useless squigs, he comes with a group of fairly competent warriors. 6 warriors in total in this warband, which is large but allows very effective flex options. Cons being the difficult inspire mechanic. I put a question mark here because there are power cards that make it debatable whether or not it's difficult. Also, in a 3 to 4 player game, it's incredibly easy to achieve. They do have lowish movement with 3 across the board and generally low defense, but 3 of these guys do get 2 shield defense when inspired. I also forgot to mention that with a large model number, often that causes the guys with lower wounds to become vulnerable to attacks, thus giving away glory points to aggro warbands. And that basically does it. So let's take a look at this warband's objective cards. Starting with the Surge, we have Craft a New Order. Score this immediately after an activation if you have 5 or more tithe counters, worth 1. Giving this a B because I think it's tricky. Definitely hard to pull off if you draw this card in the first round. Obviously, there are cards to help facilitate getting tithe counters, but it does prevent you from being willing to spend them to get the special abilities that are associated with spending tithe counters. So, tricky card. Not super sure if it's worth including in a deck. Next, there's Gruesome Certainty, worth 1 glory. Scores immediately after a friendly fighter's attack action that resulted in a critical hit. So I think that's pretty likely to eventually happen. I'm giving that an A. There's Pride of the Emissarian Cast, worth 1. Scores immediately after an activation if your leader holds an objective in enemy territory. Given this an A as well, I think it's pretty good odds that your leader could advance, end up on an objective token, still hit people with his reach to attack. Might be worth a B, but I think it really depends on what warband you're facing. Next, there's Pride of the Thorak Cast. Scores immediately after an activation if 3 or more friendly Mortex are in enemy territory, worth 1. Given this an A because these guys just auto-advance together. So you can have 1 unit move, the other 2 move with him, all be in enemy territory and just score this immediately. So very nice card. Next is Tithe Masters. Scores immediately after you gain a second or subsequent tithe counter in the same phase, worth 1. Given this an S, pretty likely to happen. You have cards that can give you 2 right off the bat. If you kill a 4+ wound enemy, you get 2 right off the bat. And considering your leader does 4 damage inspired, I think this is pretty good odds. And that does it for the Surge. Next are the Score in the End Phase cards, starting with Created for War, worth 2. Scores in an end phase if friendly fighters made 4 or more attack actions in the preceding action phase. So kind of like a keep chopping. Giving this an A, because you can always charge with a Mortec, which causes all your other guys to move, possibly in position to make attacks for themselves. Might be a bit tricky to score. Depends on how defensive and evasive the enemy warband that you're competing against is playing. There's Macabre Splendor, Hybrid. Score this in an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter is inspired, or 1 or more surviving friendly fighters each have 3 or more upgrades, worth 1. Now, given this an A, it could be an S. I don't think it's too difficult for this warband to inspire as a whole if you build your power deck right. Also, having 1 fighter get 3 upgrades is very likely, especially since you're probably going to just stack them on top of your leader, but could be hard to score this in the first round. Next is Nagash's Will, worth 2. Scores an end phase if 3 or more enemy fighters are out of action. Given this a B, against a Horde warband, this is great. Against Morgox, this is really difficult. There's Pitiless Harvest, worth 2. Scores an end phase if 2 or more enemy fighters were taken out of action in the preceding action phase. Given this a B for basically the same reasons as Nagash's Will. There's Ranks Unbroken by Descent. Score this in an end phase if 3 or more friendly Mortex are in one group in which each fighter is adjacent to 1 or more other friendly fighters 1 or more other fighters in that group, worth 1. Giving it a day, I think it's very likely to take place, although it does force you in an end phase to have your guys clustered instead of spacing out and trying to hold objective tokens, for example. Also, could be impossible if drawn late game if some of your Mortex have been taken out of action. And the last is Walking Mass Grave, worth 1. Scores an end phase if each surviving friendly fighter has 1 or more move and or charge tokens. Giving this an S because you're pretty much your whole warband can get a move counter when one friendly fighter makes an activation and moves, and then you'd have 3 other activations for anybody else who hasn't moved or charged at that point to do something. So very, very easy to score. And finally, there's a score in the third end phase card worth 3 called Peerless Conquerors. Scores in the third end phase if you have more tithe counters than the number of friendly fighters out of action. Definitely cool. I'd have to play these guys to really see how practical this is. I'm giving it an A because I think it's interesting. Whole game of taking enemy fighters out of action, possibly drawing in more tithe counters from power cards. And if you're conservative with spending them, this could be a sure thing, surprising the enemy with 3 in a third end phase. Although just being a third end phase card makes it kind of a pain. And that does it for the objective cards, which typically promote accumulating tithe counters, taking enemy fighters out of action, entering enemy territory, activating all friendly fighters, equipping upgrades, holding objectives, landing a crit, clustering friendly fighters, and surviving. Next, let's look at the power cards, starting with the Gambits. There is Ceaseless Advance. When you play this, you can discard any number of your tithe counters, push 1 friendly Mortec for each tithe counter you discarded, and 1 additional friendly Mortec up to 2 hexes towards the nearest enemy fighter. So guaranteed to push 1 fighter 2 hexes, possibly more fighters 2 hexes each, depending on the amount of tithe counters you're willing to get rid of. I'm giving this an S. Just a 1 fighter 2 hexes is really good. There's Deathless Warrior. At the start of a deal damage step, for each enemy fighter's attack action that targets a friendly Mortec, roll the defense dice. On a roll of crit, that attack action deals no damage. The combat sequence ends and you discard this card. This effect persists until the end of the round. So a really nice defense card could really screw over the enemy who might put a lot into landing a successful blow, and then you rolling just a random crit could completely undo their plans. Lasts for the whole round. I'm giving it an A. Dire Ultimatum. Restricted to the leader, -1 dice from enemy fighters' attack actions to a minimum of 1 unless the attack action targets a friendly Kainan. This effect persists until an enemy fighter makes an attack action that targets a friendly Kainan, until the friendly Kainan is out of action, or until the end of the round. So nice. Forces the enemy to basically attack your leader, even if it's more ideal for them to attack one of your Mortecs. Or at least makes it risky to attack a Mortec because of the -1 dice. Really good card, giving it an A. There's Exceptional Efficiency. When you play this card, pick 1 opponent. That opponent picks 1. You gain 2 tithe counters, or in the next activation, you can reroll any number of dice in friendly Mortex attack rolls. So pretty awesome card. Giving this an S. Obviously, your opponent's not going to want to allow you to be able to reroll dice in attack rolls, especially with Kainan looming around with 4 damage shots and scything, being able to reroll dice on all the scything attacks, which makes it very tempting for them just to give you 2 tithe tokens, which is very bad for them. So just an amazing, amazing card that forces hard choices. There's Lethal Accuracy. When you play this, you can discard any number of your tithe counters. In the next activation, +1 dice to the first attack action made by a friendly Mortec, and plus X dice in addition, where X is the number of tithe counters you discarded. So cool, guaranteed +1. You can make it more dice if you decide to discard tithe counter. So giving it an A. Better than your standard +1 dice power card. Next is Methodical Assault. As a reaction, play this after a friendly Mortex failed attack action. Pick 1 opponent. That opponent picks 1. You gain 2 tithe counters, or that Mortec makes an attack action. So also brutal. Obviously, your opponent isn't going to want to allow you to swing at them again after you miss an attack. So it makes it very tempting for them to give you those tithe counters, which are very useful for your warband. So really, really good card. Giving it an S. There's Never Falter. Restricted to Genta, +1 move to friendly Mortex. This effect persists until the end of the round. So just +1 move. And with the Mortec advance, it just makes it so that everybody profits. I'm giving this an S. Super nice. There's Never Sleep. When you play this, discard 2 tithe counters. When you do so, friendly Mortex adjacent to one another, or excuse me, adjacent to 1 or more friendly Mortex have +1 defense. This effect persists until the end of the round. So a nice defense boost, especially when used in conjunction with that card that gives -1 to people's attack rolls. Giving it a B. Might be worth an A. I'm giving it a B just because it forces these Mortex to be adjacent to each other, which might prevent you from being able to play an objective holding style. It is a pretty decent card, though. There's Never Yield. Also restricted to Kenta, sorry. Each time a friendly Mortec is dealt damage, you can discard one Tithe counter. If you do, reduce that damage by 1 to a minimum of 1. This effect persists until the end of the round. So it allows you to make your guys very durable at the cost of your Tithe counters, giving this an A. Really good card. And the Soul spell, which works on a channel with the 1 magic die of Kainan. If cast, choose one enemy fighter within 3 hexes of the caster. That fighter's player picks 1. You gain 1 Tithe counter, or each time a friendly fighter is taken out of action, deal 1 damage to the chosen fighter. This effect persists until the chosen fighter is taken out of action. So really nice. You can just choose a leader that's very important, or just a fighter that's very important. Then every time they decide to try to kill one of your Mortecs, that important fighter of theirs gets closer and closer to death, unless they just decide to give you a Tithe counter, which is super awesome for this warband anyway. So really, really good cards. I've ranked them very high because they're all awesome, or at least most of them are. And these Gambits typically promote forcing opponents to make tough decisions, gaining Tithe counters, pushing friendly fighters, improving defense, impairing enemy offense, increasing accuracy, improving movement, and damaging enemy fighters. And finally, we're going to get to the upgrades. We have Artificer's Blade, where this fighter's range 1 and range 2 attack actions have cleave. Super nice, giving it an A, especially since it can also be applied to Kainan. There's Aura of Sheesh or Shayish, -1 dice from adjacent enemy fighters' attack actions to a minimum of 1. So also good. I mean, with 2 shield defense and this card, it makes Kainan really difficult to hit. I'm giving this an S. And obviously it could be applied to other fighters, but realistically, people are applying it to Kainan. There's Discipline Charge, restricted to Mortecs. You can reroll any number of dice in this fighter's attack rolls during this fighter's charge action, so generally useful, giving it an A. Empowered Nadirite, +1 damage to this fighter's range 1 and range 2 Nadirite attack actions, +1 dice to this fighter's Nadirite attack actions. So you can have 3 hammer 4 damage attacks with your base units. Super intense. I'm giving this an A, probably worth an S. It's really good. Although it does require you to roll the support symbol. So I guess I'll stick with an A, but it's a nice card. Which brings me to Hatred of the Living, restricted to the leader. You can reroll 1 attack dice in this fighter's attack rolls for range 1 and range 2 attack actions. So beautiful. And as a reaction during an attack action that targets this fighter, before the deal damage step, reduce the damage characteristic of that attack action by 1 to a minimum of 1, and then discard this card. So it could definitely save Kainan from a big critical blow at the cost of this card. Otherwise, it just makes him generally more accurate, and he's pretty accurate to begin with, so very nice. Giving it an S. Another card restricted to Kainan called Horrifying Soul Traps. As a reaction after this fighter's activation in which this fighter's range 1 or range 2 attack actions takes an enemy fighter out of action, choose 1 enemy fighter and push the chosen fighter 1 hex away from this fighter. So it gives you a distraction so long as you're taking enemy fighters out of action. Giving it a B. Could be worth an A. Probably worth an A, because you can charge and attack some dude and then knock someone off an objective token somewhere else on the map, for example. Yeah, I'll just unofficially change this to A. Next is Tithe, restricted to Kenta. As a reaction during a friendly Mortex range 1 or range 2 attack action, before the attack roll, discard 1 Tithe counter. If you do, +1 dice to that attack action until it has been resolved. So this allows him to buff Mortex, which is always nice, at the cost of Tithe counters. Giving it a B. Could be worth more depending on how you gear your objective cards, because if you gear them toward accumulating lots of Tithe counters, then this definitely works against that purpose. Next is Unnerving Synchrony, restricted to Mortec. As a reaction after a friendly Mortex attack action, other than a scything attack action, this fighter makes an attack action. So super, super amazing. You can have a fighter charge in, make the move as part of the charge, have all the other Mortex move in as well, and then resolve that charge, and then have this guy who has this equipped attack as well. All with the Nadirite bonus, with support. Great, great card. Giving this an S. Next is Unstoppable Juggernaut, restricted to Mortec as well. +1 move, +1 wounds. So just a nice general buff, giving this an S as well, since most of the warband are Mortec. And finally, Witchlight Glimmer, restricted to Mortec as well. This fighter is inspired and cannot be uninspired. You can reroll 1 dice in this fighter's attack rolls. Nice. Fact that it's restricted to Mortec is a little bit of a drawback, though, because obviously you'd want this for Kainan. So I'm going to give this an A. And that does it for the upgrades, which typically promote improving accuracy, decreasing enemy accuracy, improving the Nadirite damage, improving defense, pushing enemy fighters, an out-of-turn attack, improving wounds, improving movement, and inspiring friendly fighters. And that does it. So here is the overview of all of this warband's cards, and they are really, really good. Objective cards, I mean, very solid. Only three that I'd say are not so reliable. Gambit cards are great. Upgrade cards are great. Just great, great cards across the board. Great fighter cards as well. I'm just going to rate this warband compared to other warbands, and we'll just see where they stand. So, overview here. These guys must manage tithe counters, which is the only real downside, forces power card choices, and can lead to hard decisions with whether or not you want to spend counters or reserve them for inspiring or for scoring objective cards. And the rest is very, very positive. As I mentioned earlier, Molog 2.0, Kainan is a very damaging and very durable and also very accurate. These guys have strong defensive power cards and some high inspired defense characteristics, 2 shields for 3 units, which means Kainan, just as an example, can be very difficult to kill, and so can the rest of the warband, which can be very discouraging. And these guys have great movement abilities. They can easily swarm with more tech units and put out high damage or take an objective holding approach. They're really just flex on crack. Amazingly versatile, amazingly strong, amazingly mobile. I'm ranking these guys as an S, and this is where I place them in the overall scheme of things, which might be controversial. And obviously, I haven't played these guys to test them, but when I just look at what they're capable of, how they have an amazing leader, how the other units are super useful, super potentially damaging, hard to hit, the cards they have access to across the board. I'm actually going to rank these guys as being the top warband so far. None of their cards are restricted yet. I think when these guys officially release and tournaments start opening up, they're just going to mop the floor and be the top of the top tier. Great at primacy or anything involving primacy because of their amazing aggressiveness. Just versatile. I mean, I've said it already. These guys are just great. Disagree with me if you'd like. I'm ranking them as the #1 warband so far. And also just say that Games Workshop really loves their Grand Alliance Death warbands. I mean, in Season 1, the warband that the most has survived the test of time is Sepulchral Guard. Season 2, there's Thorns of the Briarcreen, which is definitely the top warband of that season. Season 3, there's Lady Harrow's Mournflight, which, I still put above Morgoth's Crushes. And now Season 4, we have these guys also the top. I believe the top of all warbands so far. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, please comment below. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. And I hope you all have a nice day.